Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is certainly no stranger to the Northeast Kingdom. She is Nancy Warner, the CEO of the Orleans Essex VNA and Hospice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we're here today to talk about your annual fundraiser, Fiddlin'.
Great. I'd like to talk about that.
Right. So are you a fiddler?
Yes.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Is that how you started this fundraiser 10 years ago?
I think so. We'd had several different ideas that we had utilized, and the attendance would go down after the first couple of years. And I actually started playing fiddle when I was in first or second grade on a fiddle that my grandfather made. And though I was trained classically, when I got into my adult life, my husband wanted to learn the fiddle, and we had some friends that were fiddlers, and I really loved it. It's a very relaxed type of playing compared to what I played when I was in high school and graded school. So that's how I got interested, and I actually went up into Canada, and it's a national pastime in Canada, fiddling is, and the Maritime step dancing up there, and I just thought it would be a fantastic way to raise some money.
I suppose if I have a time in my life, I'd like to learn the fiddle. I just think, because I go to like the Bob and Mill Players and they really have some good fiddlers and, foot stomping stuff.
Two things. You need to have a good woodshed, because when you first start, the sounds that come out of fiddle, it's a very difficult instrument to play because it's not fretted. So intonation is based on where you're putting your fingers on the strings. And I know when my husband started that, he didn't go to the woodshed, but I did, until he got over the first part of learning.
So we might get noise complaints from the neighbors.
You might,
right,
depending on how fast you pick it up.
Right. Well, considering my musical talent, I probably won't pick it up anytime soon. So tell me a little bit about this event. It's the 10th annual. It's a 10th anniversary of the annual Magic of the Masters Fiddlers.
Right, and we started at the Haskell because it is, we call it an international concert because we've always had Canadian champion and an American champion. And we've had some of the greatest fiddlers ever. We had Buddy McMasters out of Cape Breton. And we've just had some really, really good fiddlers. And so, because this is my last year, I'll be doing it, and I thought it was the 10th anniversary that it would be nice to be able to go back to the Haskell and perhaps have a couple surprise acts.
Right.
And I thoroughly
Are you going to be one of them?
I may be.
Right.
I may be.
Do you like getting up in front of a crowd like that?
No, actually, my favorite instrument to play is not the fiddle, it's the keyboard or piano, and I love to accompany people. So I'm the happiest when I'm doing the chording for who's on the fiddle. But I get more nervous, particularly because if you're the lead on the fiddle, they know if you make a mistake, and if you make a mistake on the keyboard, nobody knows. So,
Tell me, what is the difference? This is a question I often ask people, musical-minded people, but what's the difference between violin music and fiddle music? They both look alike to me. Are they the same, or is it just how they play?
Yeah, the instrument is exactly the same. It's a style.
Right.
And the fiddlers will say it's because it's toe tapping. They do the toe tapping music. So it's in the style, and people that want to say that they're going to present a violin piece usually are those that are doing the more traditional type of music or, in fact, classical.
Right. For me, if you said that we are going to have Magic of the Master Violiners, I probably wouldn't go. But because I like fiddle music, I will probably go if I'm around. So I think there is especially in rural Vermont, especially on the Vermont-Quebec border, we're much more familiar with fiddle music because in my years of recording history, I find that particularly the French really like their fiddle music.
Oh, and they're good fiddle players. There's no doubt. I think, when you think of a fiddle player, they're usually doing reels and jigs and the dance music. And as you can see on this concert we're doing, these two lovely girls are actually Louie's daughters, and they dance to their dad's music, and they're very, very fast dancers. It's a particular type of dancing that they do.
Right. Now, who are some people of importance, of stature, coming to this fiddling? Is it a contest or just music?
No, no, no. This is just going to be a concert where you listen to them.
Right.
So Louis Schreier is a judge. He has won numerous awards across Canada. He is one of a set of triplets, and they're all master fiddle players. They actually have recorded together. And then his older brother is also a fiddler of international renown and has traveled over to Europe to present concerts. I mean, these guys are just really, really good. Scott is a local boy from Barrie, Vermont, and he is self-taught. Louis can actually play all styles of music. Scott's dad was a very, very good fiddler and won most of the local concerts or contests that were going on throughout New England. Excuse me. Scott plays a fiddle that his dad made. And most of what he presents are pieces that he has written and crafted himself.
Right. And what is it's a fundraiser? What is it being raised for?
Hospice, our hospice program.
Right. And hospice is people who are journeying to their final days.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So in this economy, and then with all the changes in the healthcare world, it must be a kind of a stressful time, isn't it?
Yes, it is a stressful time. You know, in my time with the VNA, I have, excuse me, I've operated under 3 reimbursement systems by the government, the federal government, and of course Medicaid by the state. And they really are preparing because we do know that the cost of health care in our country is not sustainable. They're going to have to do something about it. And, you know, from us, we feel that we're a smaller piece of the pie, the home care services, home-based services. However, they are looking that we're going into our 4th major revision of how we're reimbursed. And there's some special issues of how they gather their data. Being a rural agency in a very rural part of Vermont, you know, many people think it's a small agency and it's rural, so it's not going to cost as much to provide services. It's the exact opposite because of our tremendous travel, because of the difficulty of recruiting specialists to go out into the field. So for all those reasons, it is expensive. And the documentation, you know, whether it's with taxes or whether it's with whatever business you're in, you know, when you hear the state or the Fed say they're going to make it easier for you, you know that you're going to have more
Sure.
documentation, more administrative expense for what you're doing.
Yeah, you know, when I served, as you know, I served in legislature, and I often saw that when we came up with these new improved ideas, because I served on the healthcare committee, it was almost guaranteed I would get a call from a couple of my doctor friends who assured me that what we were doing really wasn't going to make it easier on them. So the other thing is, I've heard rumors around town that, well, first of all, you're the founder.
Correct.
And you have been with the VNA for how many years?
44 years.
And tell me, I've heard rumors that you're stepping down, you're retiring.
I am retiring.
And how does that feel?
Well, you know, I was reading a saying the other day. I'm an avid reader, and I was reading something, and it hit me so true that you don't realize what you've got until you're saying goodbye to it. And I've always realized that our little VNA is just top shelf, and it's top shelf because we have top shelf staff. There's no question. So, of course, it's, you know, on one hand, I'm going to miss the people, I'm going to miss the challenges, but on the other hand, I really feel that I'm not a youngster anymore. You know, I've had my 39th, or whatever it is, and I really have some other passions in life that I would like to be able to
Do
be
you
involved
mean
with.
you have things more passionate you're about than the bureaucracy of government telling you how to do your job? You're going to miss that, aren't you?
No, that part of it. No, I won't miss that part of it because I think I'm a believer of and have been since I started the agency in 1969 that the local community knows what they need. And our agency has a board of 10, and I believe in local control.
Right.
And it's a bit distressing for me to see. I always thought that things would happen so that the communities would have more control in how that they designed what was needed by them. And I see that really going away. I see the state level and the federal level of really coming up with more and more guidelines, more and more mandates, more and more ways of telling the people how it's going to be.
Oh,
So,
I agree with you totally because in my time at the State House, in my short few years, and then I covered it as a reporter beforehand for a few years, I'm astounded how government doesn't think we can do anything by ourselves. You know that you know you take, you know they want to babysit us the entire time. So 1969 you started. I was 4 years old, so I wasn't really.
I obviously wasn't.
Yeah, and I wasn't really concerned about home health care at that point. I think, you know, fortunately by 4 I was out of my diapers. But so I weren't really worried about home health care. But how did this all come about, home health?
Well, it's a long story and a story how I got involved, but how home health came about was for the same reason that the feds are looking at all these new programs you're hearing about, that they're giving money to the state to take over some of the things that they've been responsible for. But in 1965, there was a feeling that they wanted to shorten hospital stays, and so they were trying to figure out how that could be done, and they came to the conclusion that home-based services would do that. So the federal government put out seed monies or grant monies, and they were given to the different states. The state of Vermont, it was given to the health department, and the health department went out to work with community groups to see if, it was called at that time home health agencies, home health services, if the communities were interested in doing the service. And so what happened for the history of our particular agency is quite interesting. And again, back in 1969 when I designed the agency, the feds were pretty strict in terms of how things had to be carried out. And the health department at that time, I believe, had its own public health department. And so the surveys, the federal government paid the state to have folks come and watch how we were operating, how we developed and how we operated. And so what happened in our particular case is that in 1967, about, I think I'm correct, the seed monies were given to a community group in St. Johnsbury. And the state of Vermont designated the entire Northeast Kingdom, the 3-county area. And so they developed their agency called the Caledonia Home Health Care Agency. And it was led by a lady by the name of Joan Blankenship. Well, for whatever reason, Joan wasn't able to get up into the northern tier, the northern Essex and Orleans County, and the services she provided were only to the folks down in Caledonia County. And so the state came in, operating for the federal government, and said, we're taking the northern tier of the county away from you. And at that time, there was a small community group very interested and wanted to have the home-based services for the northern part of the kingdom. And on that committee were some of my heroes. Helen Batchelor from Derby Line, who was a public health nurse for many, many years. Dr. Durgan, Paul Eastman, who had the pharmacy down on Main Street. Fraser Marsh, who was a nurse that was working at the hospital from North Troy. I think that made up their committee. And they actually, at the time, I was working for the Parent-Child Center. I had designed a health program for the Parent-Child Center for the 3-county area. And the community group went to see my boss, whose name was John Block, to see if he would release me from my position, that they didn't want to, they told me they didn't want to seem to be pirates, but they went to him to say, we really would like to approach Nancy and see if we could hire her to develop the VNA for the Northern County. So that's how I got involved in home care.
Right. And while today you have a very close working relationship with the hospital and the doctors, if I recall right, in one of our talks, that wasn't necessarily the case at first among some doctors.
No, it was really interesting because we had a lot of primary or country doctors when we started in 1969. And the fact that we were put in as a subdivision of Northeast Kingdom Mental Health Services, that's what they were called back in 1969, not only the doctors, but a lot of the community folks saw us as mental health nurses. And so it was rather difficult and sometimes for them to accept us. And the other thing that happened was that the doctors that were country doctors or primary physicians or general practitioners, I guess they were called, really felt that we were out doing things that they traditionally could do. You know, that we were doing blood pressures, we could do venipunctures. And I know that I had one doctor call me up and said, you know, what are you doing, Nancy? Your nurses are out there practicing medicine, and you've left for us, what, brain surgery? You know, so it's been an evolution. And certainly, you know, when we started home care, it was nothing for a patient to have a length of stay in the hospital for a month. You know, so it's a whole, and we know how short hospital stays are now. Some folks don't get any stay at all if they're having outpatient surgery.
Yeah,
so.
you can almost go in for brain surgery and be out the same day now.
Well, some of it's pretty fast, yes it is. So the home-based services, I think, are vital for the well-being of our folks.
Let me put it this way. You're really lucky that you're retiring now, because if I had ever been one of your patients, because I have never been sick, I have never spent a night in the hospital, I would be the worst patient. I'd be such a wimp. I would drive your agency crazy. You probably wouldn't be able to get a nurse to come because I don't have time to be sick, and I don't have the tolerance, and I'm an all-around wimp when it comes to being sick.
Well, men, generally speaking, don't make the best of patients, but I think, you know, our nurses are a very compassionate, very dedicated group. All of our staff is, and we've brought people through some pretty nasty situations, and you know, the complaints are so small that over 44 years they wouldn't even fill one notebook.
I know the recent passing of my father-in-law, one of your nurses came in. He was a male nurse, and come to find out he's usually typically reserved, and he came in, and it was the first time meeting my father-in-law, who was an old logger. And at first I was thinking, well, how's this relationship going to work out? But then he looks up on the wall, sees my late brother-in-law's big lake trout, and the nurse said to him something about my father-in-law about fishing, and bang. That did it, because they were both big fishermen. And they got going like they were best friends forever while they were going about doing their medical thing.
Well, I think what makes a difference for a lot of patients too, and you know, I also worked in the hospital setting, both as a student and then briefly after I graduated from UVM. But I think the difference is that, remember, we go into folks' homes and they're in control, not us. It's their home. They can say how things are going to go, and we can certainly say, well, if you're not going to be compliant with your plan, I guess, you know, we shouldn't be here. But whereas at the hospital, pretty much when they come in your room and they tell you you're going to do something, you do it. Or I felt that when I've been a patient anyway.
You know, with my history hat on, I find it interesting, this whole evolution of how we care, particularly for older people. But like, for example, Ruth Austin of Newport, she's 99. And she's 99 and mentally going on 60. And I think she's at the aging process backwards. Her in-laws used to run the poor farm out on the city farm road. And she, you know, back in those days, in the, before Social Security and everything, a lot of your people, you know, they didn't go to the nursing home, or they didn't get home care. If they didn't have active families, a lot of them ended up on the city farm. And so we've gone from putting them on the city farm if you didn't have a good family life, to now where then you started warehousing them in nursing homes, and now we're trying to keep them in the home. But are they trying to, go backwards again, or?
Oh, I think a lot of things. I mean, one of the things that I've been asked to do is to go back and show some milestones of the agency over the 44 years. And so the way I did that was I dug out all of our boxes of our board minutes. And took a look, and it's a really interesting walk because what you see is things are cyclic.
Oh, sure.
You'll know, and I'll say, oh my gosh, they were suggesting this back in 1970, and now it's a new idea again. So I do think that there's only so many ways you can look at things. But I think the whole idea was that people don't need to be in the hospitals and as long. They don't need to be in nursing homes if they have a support system, and they are happier. Their quality of life is better if they can stay within their own home. So I certainly know as I march towards that magic date of when I won't be able to do what I want to do physically, that, I hope those supports are still in place because I certainly will be happier in my own home.
Right.
There's no question.
So, what do you plan on doing with your spare time?
Well, I have a lot of things I want to do. I'm an avid amateur photographer. I love it, and I've been taking private lessons from an instructor at UVM, and I want to be able to go sit in the woods and wait for the animals to come rather than seeing something and jumping out and trying to get a decent picture. I really want to be able to have some time to do the photo ops. Whereas now, basically, if I do a photo op, I have to take a vacation to do that and go where the animals are. As you noted, I do the music, and so I'm hoping that I can connect up with all the little groups that are out and about that I haven't been able to do, either with the fiddle or the keyboard or both. I have 4 grandchildren that reside in the area, and though I think they've told me a tall tale that they weren't going to grow, my gosh, they've grown so fast, and I want to have time to spend with them. And the 2 little granddaughters we bought them a pony a few years back, and I really would like to have time to go out to some of the local shows. Their mom is working full time, and so, and I just really realized that, you collect things for your lifetime, and I would like to kind of reorganize and, particularly with my pictures and,
Right.
and kind of get that part of my life in order.
So another big question: you're leaving. Who's taking your place?
The field is good, and I'm not at liberty to say. I mean, I definitely do have some ideas of what is needed. We do have a search committee, and they have nearly completed their work. So I'm assuming that by our next board meeting is in about a week and a half, that they will make their final decision.
It probably comes at a good time for the transition because I think in the next couple years, I know you've seen a lot of change, but I think with Obamacare and with the states, with Shumlin Care, I think you're going to probably see some unprecedented changes, and it's probably a good time for somebody to be coming on, because no matter what I know you'd plan to retire, so it's probably a good time.
I think it's a good time. Dr. Also Brooks said once when he was retiring, he said, I would know when it was time, and I believe it is time for me. I think, that there will be a transition when they make their final choice, and that some time when I'll be left that I can work, share what's in my mind of my 44 years in terms of what I've gathered, what the new system's going to look like, and so I think it is a good time. I think that you look at how you perform, and I've always been my harshest critic. If somebody doesn't have to tell me if I'm not doing something as well as I could be, and I think that we need some young blood and some real vitality, and it becomes harder and harder. Not in getting up in the morning. I'm a 4:30 person to get up in the morning, but boy, when nighttime comes, I'm about worthless.
I'm the same way. 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a power nap for about 15 minutes during midday, and I'm all ready to go until about 8 o'clock, and that's it. So it must be your night meetings. You didn't care for those very much.
Well, I think that it's harder, and the travel's harder. I live 22 miles out, 45-mile trip every day, but I think. The new systems, I look at them and I understand, I think, where the state's going to end up, though there's been some confusion on what we're being told. And there needs to be some new relationships, and there's going to be an awfully lot of just hard work, because I think the new environment is going to demand changes in how we do business, some pretty dramatic changes. And I think the culture of the agency is going to have to grow with that. And I think it's harder for somebody. On one hand, it's easy because I have the pieces, but on the other hand, when you've built a certain culture, it's hard to tear that down to build the new one.
And I think a lot of healthcare, like I think the hospitals, I think they're facing the same things. I think they're going to have to take a hard look at how many employees they have and what they offer. Because I know back when I was in legislature, there was talk, and there probably still is does every hospital need an MRI? Does every hospital need the latest, greatest, or do you have certain hospitals with certain pieces of equipment?
Well, and I think, they even are looking now at how many hospitals are needed. So,
Right.
yeah, and the new ACO has been formed in the state, and that's for Medicare only now, but I'm sure that will expand out. So I think that the hospitals are not having an easy time. I don't think mental health is having an easy time. The legislators this year looked at, could they change the way care was given and how much money are they going to give? The VNAs, they didn't cut our Medicaid tax. That's a huge amount that goes on to providing Medicaid services. And I think the one thing that's been frustrating for me throughout the years is that Medicaid does not pay any of its providers what it costs us to do business. And we have to, that's half of the reason why we do some fundraisers, is that we're trying to raise the money to supplement, because you don't want to refuse services just because they're not covered by CARE or Blue Cross or somebody that's going to pay their share.
Now, I can't remember if it was somebody in your agency or one of the other agencies here, and they said with all the new jobs that are supposed to be coming to the area, that's all well and fine, but it also will prove a competition for, there's going to be a lot of jobs, which is going to make it harder for folks like you and these other, or like even long-term care homes to get workers, because there's going to be more choices. Do you worry about that?
I don't worry about more choices. I think what I worry about is that they're predicting in less than 5 years, there's a reduction, or not a reduction, but there's not the availability of nurses that are needed to the tune of about 1.2 million. And so if you increase the population, one of the figures I've heard is that it's going to increase the population 10,000. Well, 10,000, that's going to, bounce off the providers that are currently here. And so are those providers able to get the necessary staff in? And there's such competition for staff. Again, when we look at getting physical therapists, we recruit out of Canada. And we've had nurses out of Canada. We have nurses right now and PTs out of Canada. And so that's what I worry about.
Yeah, that's true. All right, we only have a few more minutes left. Let's go back to the magic of the Master Fiddlers. And when is that going to be held again?
That's going to be June 15th at 7 o'clock at the Haskell Opera House in Derby Line.
And if you've never been to a fiddling event, what can people expect from it?
Well, they will go home and their toes will be a bit sore, because I will tell you, when you hear these masters, your toes just go. And we've actually had some people that just broke forth and stood up and did their little dance. Right. I think what we have found every concert that we've put on is that when it's time for the grand finale, they will ask for one more or one more or one more. And the performers, last year we had April Virch out of Canada, and she could play her fiddle and dance at the same time. And people just would stand up, standing ovation, and clap and clap and clap. And it's informal, you're talked to by the musicians. It's just a fun evening. It's not a formal evening. You can come in your jeans if you wish. We hope, I've always hoped that the children, the young folk would come, because we sit right on the border, and fiddling is something down here that is, as I've seen it evolve, and like even at the Fiddlers, Northeast Fiddlers meets on a monthly basis, that the young folks are getting fewer and fewer. And it's a tradition that I would hope would carry, that French, Quebecois, American, New England style. We have a style of our own, and it's a great style. So I would love to see the kids come.
It's funny you mention that, because that's one of my pet peeves sometimes when people talk, you know, people move here, they talk about we lack any culture. Like, no, we have culture
Oh,
here.
we have culture.
And it's just that, you know, people choose not to honor it very much. Like, I don't even think we, the residents here, I don't think we always do the best at, you know, sharing, you know, this French Canadian heritage. Like, we don't have a French Canadian festival or anything, and I've often thought that might be kind of nice to do, because other parts, you know, other communities along the Vermont-Quebec border actually do that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think, you know, that what we have for cultures, there's in my mind, I heard something on public radio that really brought me up kind of short, and it was a plea to have a screen-free week for your children. And, you know, when I go to Canada and I see these kids in camps, they have camps all across Canada with these young people to learn to play the fiddle and to dance. And they have such a good time to, you know, that I would hope, you know, that we do keep those things that we do so well and keep them out there and not show them on the screen, but go and participate, have that social interaction, have that fun together.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
So is it safe to say that that when you get up on stage, you're going to put the masters to shame?
Oh, absolutely no. In fact, I think the masters will probably play with me so they can cover up all my mistakes.
All right.
No.
Thank you for coming on. And you know what? Is we might have to do this again, where then we can even delve deeper in the future before you retire. Delve really deep into the history of home health care, even further, because, you know, I just think that, you know, you're such a textbook of history on that topic. So
I've been asked if I would write a book, so we will see, but I would love, and anybody that's out there that wants to come celebrate that our agency is strong and that I'm going to have fun in my retirement, and that you might even get to meet the new person. It is June 28th, I think they've planned, and I think it's 6 to 8:30, and
oh, that's your retire.
That's my retirement party at Eastside, and I believe they're trying to get some of the
And
speakers.
is this open to the public?
Absolutely. Come, feel free.
June 28th at the East Side at
Eastside.
what time?
It's 6 to 8:30, I think now, because I'm not planning it, and they are. But I think I know that they're trying to get some speakers from the state and to talk about what it has meant to have this service up here. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I'd love to have you come. And you know, as I say, it has been. If you have to work, then I could not have asked for a better place to be. You know?
Okay, and thanks for your many years of dedication to the people of the area, because, as I said, you've been doing this for almost as long as I've been alive. And,
It's true.
So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.